Imagine gazing upon a stretch of water at daybreak, with lavender mist drifting across the surface as though it carries untold secrets. The world around you slumbers, the air is crisp, and you are the sole witness to a new morning. No words pass your lips. There is only the distant call of a bird and the rustle of leaves whispering their private wisdom. At that moment, you sense a gentle shift, as if you have left behind the familiar clamor of daily life and entered a quieter realm. This feeling, at once peaceful and slightly mysterious, embodies the essence of solitude. Solitude resembles a threshold. Crossing it can be enchanting, for it evokes the possibility of deeper self-awareness, insight, and renewal. Yet, it may also feel unfamiliar, for we live in an age defined by ceaseless communication and instant responses. Societies across the globe champion extroversion, collaboration, and connectivity.
Man was learning to numerically relate and to predict. Theories were developed by which the many factors in a problem could be numerically related. But the magnitude of the calculations necessary made many such theories impractical.
Waking up to a barrage of messages on a phone, or continually occupying oneself with scrolling and browsing, can seem like the normal state of affairs. Against that background, genuine solitude can appear both beautiful and elusive, a fleeting oasis of time and space where one can simply be. Humanity's fascination with solitude stretches across centuries and continents. In religious traditions, there is a recurring motif of ascetics and visionaries who withdrew from society to dwell in the quiet hush of the desert, the forest, or the mountain. Philosophers and writers likewise praise the clarifying power of time spent alone, whether it is to wander the countryside in contemplative reverie or to wrestle with thoughts in a private study. Artists often tell of how moments of introspection fueled their creativity. Scientists and inventors speak of revelations that arrived only when free from the stream of social feedback. Yet solitude is a word carrying multiple shades of meaning. For some, it brings healing rest from the demands of a noisy environment. For others, it signifies a confrontation with the echoes of their mind, which can be a source of anxiety if they feel unprepared. At times, solitude is conflated with loneliness. Even though the two differ at the core, loneliness arises from an unmet desire for connection, while solitude is often welcomed for the mental freedom it provides. Defining solitude. Solitude can be viewed as a conscious choice to be alone, marking a key distinction from loneliness, which typically involves a feeling of being cut off from desired companionship. This is not merely a technical difference in terminology. In solitude, individuals often feel empowered. They seek or accept aloneness to focus on personal projects, spiritual insight, or simply to pause the torrent of daily interactions. Loneliness, on the other hand, carries the sting of unmet social needs, painting solitude as unwelcome. It is perhaps easiest to think of solitude as a space or moment in which external stimuli become muted, allowing for a more pronounced sense of one's internal world. This can happen physically, such as when a person retreats to a mountaintop cabin. It can happen temporally, such as when an individual wakes early before others begin their day. It may even happen psychologically, as when someone meditates in a busy train station, forging an inward stillness despite the surrounding commotion. Because of its association with silence or quiet, solitude often heightens awareness. When group chatter and social obligations dissolve, a person's thoughts and emotions emerge more starkly. One might feel a sense of calm or creativity. Alternatively, anxieties lurking beneath the surface can become more perceptible. Thus, solitude is by its nature a revealing condition, shining a flashlight on one's inner life. Paradoxically, it is precisely this self-revelation that lends solitude its transformative power, and that can make it daunting. Individuals unaccustomed to introspection might find solitude unsettling, a confrontation with truths they have not examined. Yet those who cultivate it mindfully frequently attest that the reward is greater clarity and the ability to live more authentically once they rejoin social spheres. historical and philosophical perspectives on solitude. Ancient Greek and Roman views. Philosophers of the ancient Mediterranean world understood the value of reflective withdrawal. While they did not always label these practices as solitude, their approaches to self-examination often required some degree of aloneness. Socrates is said to have paused to consider in absolute stillness whatever questions preoccupied him before engaging others. Plato, in his allegories, implied that withdrawing from the common illusions of the crowd was necessary to perceive higher truths. Stoic philosophers such as Seneca embraced an inner fortress of reflection. Though they were active in society, they recommended intervals of mental seclusion to better train one's moral compass and cultivate equanimity. Seneca's letters offer guidance for those wrestling with adversity, advocating for times of quiet where one can confront personal failings and aspirations with clear-eyed calm. Marcus Aurelius, another prominent Stoic, composed meditative writings during stolen private moments. Even though he was an emperor guiding affairs of state, he acknowledged solitude as an indispensable ally in clarifying his judgments. Early Christian and monastic traditions. The early centuries of Christianity saw men and women seeking God in literal deserts. These desert fathers and mothers believed that the bustle of towns hindered direct communion with the divine. They fled to remote landscapes, rocky deserts and caves, where they could devote themselves to continuous prayer and asceticism. Though asceticism is not universal to all traditions, the Christian monks of this era found that solitude sharpened their spiritual senses, forcing them to confront not only the presence of God, but also their inner temptations and frailties. Over time, monastic communities arose, often incorporating periods of shared worship with extended intervals of silence. Monks and nuns might gather for daily prayers and communal meals, then retire to simple cells to practice contemplative reading, manual labor, or silent meditation. The Rule of St. Benedict, for instance, contained stipulations that balanced community living with solitary reflection. Thus, solitude became a disciplined practice, anchored in the rhythms of prayer, fasting, and reflection. These monastic ideals influenced broader Christian thought. Writers like Thomas Merton, living many centuries after the early hermits, carried forward the notion that solitude does not necessarily remove one from responsibility toward humanity. Instead, it equips a person to re-engage the world with greater compassion and insight. Merton, ensconced in a Trappist monastery, continually stressed that solitude was not about despising the outside world, but about learning to see it anew through the lens of inner transformation. Renaissance and Enlightenment thinkers. In Renaissance Europe, scholars increasingly sought private retreats to pore over ancient manuscripts and produce new works. Michel de Montaigne famously secluded himself in a tower library, surrounding himself with books and the mottos he inscribed on his walls. From that vantage, he produced essays that served as personal meditations on friendship, virtue, mortality, and self-knowledge. Montaigne's example suggests how solitude can be a fertile ground for forging a deeper understanding of the human condition. During the period often called the Enlightenment, conversation flourished in the salons and coffeehouses of major cities, yet there was also a strong thread of thought cautioning against constant social engagement. Blaise Pascal reflected that many of humanity's problems stem from our inability to sit quietly alone in a room. His statement may feel hyperbolic, yet it resonates in modern times where the compulsion to fill silence can be overwhelming. Pascal's remark hints that the difficulty of solitude is not simply a neutral fact, but perhaps a root cause of restlessness, conflict, and distraction. Romantic and Transcendentalist eras. By the time the Romantic movement rose to prominence in Europe, solitude was celebrated with renewed fervor. Writers and artists emphasized the individual's emotional communion with nature. Poets such as William Wordsworth wandered amid the Lake District, finding in these solitary walks the seeds of transcendent poetry. Wordsworth's solitary experiences in Spots of Time allowed him to fuse memory, imagination, and raw emotion into verses that still resonate today. Across the Atlantic, thinkers like Ralph Waldo Emerson advocated self-reliance, urging each person to look within for wisdom rather than conform unquestioningly to societal norms. His friend Henry David Thoreau famously spent a couple of years at Walden Pond, living in a small cabin to explore the essence of deliberate living. Walden, his resulting text, has become a defining statement on the value of solitude in nature. Thoreau's experiment continues to speak to readers seeking a deeper connection with the environment and a simpler way of life. Modern and postmodern perspectives. Entering more modern times, philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche championed the idea that individuals must periodically step away from society's herd mentality to discover their authentic values. Although Nietzsche often employed combative or dramatic language, his underlying conviction was that solitude was a crucible for self-creation, where one's destiny could be shaped beyond the bounds of popular opinion. 20th century existentialists, including Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, observed that isolation can also heighten the stark sense of being alone in an indifferent universe. Their writings underscore the anxiety that can arise when one faces the absence of inherent meaning in life. While not every existentialist advocated for solitude as a solution, they recognized that solitary reflection often triggers awareness of freedom and responsibility. In parallel, postmodern thinkers like Michel Foucault pointed out that even when alone, individuals carry with them the social constructs and power relations learned from society. The net effect is that solitude can still be shaped by external forces, thus complicating our understanding of what it truly means to be alone. Contrasting solitude and loneliness. Popular conversation often mingles solitude with loneliness, yet these experiences diverge in critical ways. Loneliness is typically experienced as painful, marked by an acute sense of being unseen, unwanted, or locked outside the doors of the community. Those who are lonely may crave closeness with others, but find it elusive. In such instances, time alone is not a gift, but a burden. Solitude, however, usually emerges from a deliberate choice to be by oneself. Individuals who practice solitude often relish the opportunity to unplug from social demands, seeing it as a path to greater self-knowledge or creative freedom. The emotional tone is generally positive, peaceful, introspective, sometimes invigorating. While loneliness can drain a person's mental and emotional reserves, solitude tends to replenish them, assuming it is freely chosen and not prolonged to an unhealthy extreme. Nonetheless, solitude and loneliness can indeed overlap. Someone might set out for a quiet weekend retreat, only to discover that unaddressed feelings of longing, regret, or sadness surface in the absence of distractions. Equally, a person feeling lonely might stumble upon a sense of contentment through mindful acceptance of their alone time. Thus, we must not overly simplify these states. Still, the fundamental distinction remains. Loneliness feels imposed, whereas solitude is embraced. Psychological and emotional benefits of solitude. Increased self-awareness. One of solitude's richest gifts is the deepening of self-awareness. In group settings, identities confuse with collective roles, and individuals may rarely question the underlying motives or assumptions guiding them. Solitude removes the immediate feedback of others, exposing one to unfiltered thoughts and feelings. Over time, such reflections can clarify values, preferences, and goals. Some forms of therapeutic practice encourage clients to spend moments alone, journaling or meditating, precisely because this inner dialogue helps unravel false narratives. Rather than relying on external validation or denial, a person quietly confronts their mind, discovering hidden dreams or unspoken fears. Psychologists who study self-awareness often highlight how solitary reflection complements social support, offering a balanced path to self-understanding. Emotional regulation. Daily life can be stressful, whether due to work demands, family obligations, or internal struggles like anxiety. Solitude provides a pause button, allowing the emotional system to rest and reset. Even a brief interlude, a walk in a park, or an hour with devices turned off, can soothe frayed nerves. By stepping out of the noise, an individual can examine the triggers that cause upset, ultimately returning to responsibilities with a calmer perspective. Indeed, many mental health professionals advocate for solitude breaks, similar to water breaks for athletes, especially in workplaces with intense pacing. These breaks may be as simple as closing one's office door or finding a quiet stairwell. The principle remains the same. A short, deliberate withdrawal can mitigate burnout and restore emotional equilibrium. Creativity and problem solving. Creative breakthroughs often arise when the mind drifts in solitude. Free from the need to respond to external chatter, the individual can enter states of deep concentration or imaginative wandering. Writers, painters, and inventors throughout history have credited solitary hours as essential for transforming scattered ideas into cohesive visions. Even in fields not typically associated with creativity, such as mathematics or engineering, solitude can foster innovative thinking by enabling extended focus. Psychologists researching creative processes confirm that while group brainstorming can spark initial ideas, the act of refining and synthesizing them usually benefits from alone time. Solitude removes social pressure to please or conform, granting thinkers the freedom to explore tangential or unconventional approaches without the immediate influence of others. Spiritual and existential insight. Many world religions place solitude at the heart of spiritual practice, whether it is the hermit's cell, the monk's cloister, or the yogi's cave. In quiet isolation, believers listen more intently for the voice of God or divine truth. Secular spiritual seekers, too, describe moments of awe and transcendence occurring while seated on a lonely mountain ridge or walking alone at dawn. They sense a connection to something larger than themselves, unmediated by social constructs. Existentially speaking, solitude can bring a person face to face with deep questions regarding the nature of reality and personal meaning. Such encounters may provoke discomfort, but can also spark profound epiphanies. Without the cacophony of daily tasks or trivial conversations, one can contemplate mortality, purpose, or cosmic mystery on a level that group contexts seldom allow. Restoration and resilience. Solitude is a remedy for the modern ailment of overstimulation. With digital screens constantly vying for attention, the human mind is rarely given the space to rest. Psychologists studying attention restoration theory suggest that natural or calm solitary settings help the brain recover from fatigue. Time spent gazing at a field or simply letting the mind wander can replenish cognitive reserves, making people more effective when they resume tasks requiring focused attention. Such restoration extends beyond mere efficiency. Emotional resilience grows when individuals regularly step away from commotion, learning to navigate their internal states. They become more adept at identifying the early warning signs of stress and more skilled at diffusing tension before it escalates. In this way, solitude functions like a mental and emotional spa, an environment conducive to rejuvenation. Practical approaches to cultivating healthy solitude. Setting boundaries. In an era where many feel perpetually on call, safeguarding solitude requires conscious effort. This might involve designating specific times of day as offline periods, silencing alerts, or physically moving away from communal spaces. One might carve out a reading nook in the home or reserve a weekly slot for a digital detox. Communicating these boundaries to loved ones and colleagues is key, ensuring that the solitude seeker does not come across as aloof or neglectful. Boundaries also involve an internal shift. Many people feel anxious if they are not instantly reachable, as if they are shirking responsibilities. By reframing solitude as a healthy, necessary practice, guilt diminishes. Life partners, friends, or family members often become more supportive when they see that short intervals of solitude enhance a person's well-being and availability afterward. Mindful or meditative practices. Techniques like mindfulness and seated meditation provide a structured form of solitude. Even in a small apartment or busy household, one can sit quietly, close the eyes, and turn attention inward. While the hustle and bustle might not vanish, individuals can learn to observe external noises without becoming emotionally entangled. Over time, this fosters an inner sanctuary that remains accessible under various conditions. Journaling similarly enriches solitude by offering a tangible outlet for thoughts. Writing can capture fleeting ideas or emotions, turning them into a narrative that can be analyzed and understood. Some people prefer pen and paper diaries, while others use typed documents. Whichever method one chooses, the act of private reflection in written form can clarify insights that remain half-formed if left swirling in the mind. Retreats and nature immersion. Organized retreats, silent, meditative, or otherwise, are designed to immerse participants in solitude for an extended period. These events reduce daily distractions, sometimes prohibiting phone use or limiting conversation. Although retreat environments might vary widely, from austere monastic settings to cozy wellness centers, the core idea is consistent. By stepping out of habitual routines and social roles, individuals can experience a deeper level of introspection. Nature immersion works similarly. Spending a weekend trekking through forests, walking along a secluded coastline, or stargazing in a national park can awaken a sense of wonder. These natural encounters often grant a perspective shift, reminding people of the planet's vastness and complexity. In that context, personal stresses might feel more manageable, and creative or spiritual senses can blossom. Balancing engagement and withdrawal. While solitude is advantageous in many ways, it is not a panacea for all of life's challenges. It is also not healthy to substitute every social interaction with aloneness. Humans are social creatures, reliant on connection for emotional and physical well-being. The ideal lies in balancing solitude with engagement, so that each realm enriches the other. A healthy schedule might feature meaningful time spent with loved ones, group collaboration at work, or involvement in community events, punctuated by quiet intervals for reflection. The exact balance varies by individual. An introvert might need longer periods of personal space to recharge, while an extrovert might thrive with more frequent social engagement and briefer moments of solitude. Regardless of temperament, the principle is consistent. Solitary time, when maintained in harmony with social bonds, can enhance overall satisfaction and interpersonal presence. Insights from seminal books on solitude. Many authors have devoted entire works to the subject of solitude, examining its nuances from psychological, spiritual, or personal viewpoints. Below are a handful of notable texts that collectively paint a diverse portrait of why being alone can be beneficial and how best to integrate it into life. Walden by Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau's sojourn in a small cabin by a serene pond, which stretched beyond a single year, represents a famed experiment in deliberate living. Though his project was partly a critique of materialistic society, it also served as a testament to solitude's ability to foster a heightened appreciation for the natural world and a clearer sense of purpose. In reflections on morning walks, the changes of the seasons, and the simple tasks of daily life, Thoreau exemplified how removing distractions can reveal the abundance present in seemingly mundane moments. Solitude, A Return to the Self by Anthony Storr. Anthony Storr, a British psychiatrist, questioned the mid-20th century assumption that psychological health depends almost entirely on interpersonal relationships. Drawing examples from history and clinical practice, Storr argued that imaginative and intellectual engagement can flourish in solitude. Although supportive relationships remain important, Storr insisted that solitary pursuits, such as artistic creation or philosophical contemplation, can also fulfill and heal. Thoughts in Solitude by Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton's reflections illustrate how solitude can become a spiritual discipline, guiding one to humility and communion with a divine presence. He viewed solitude not as an escape from civilization, but a purposeful retreat that prepares the seeker to engage the world with renewed clarity and compassion. Merton's ideas, though rooted in Christian mysticism, resonate with the broader notion that quiet time alone allows for a purifying confrontation with one's own deeper truths. The Art of Solitude by Stephen Batchelor. Stephen Batchelor, known for his secular Buddhist approach, writes about solitude as a skill that must be cultivated. Drawing upon meditation experiences and existential philosophy, Batchelor presents solitude as a practice of stepping away from perpetual stimulation, allowing insights about the nature of self and reality to emerge. He portrays solitude as an art, suggesting that one's capacity to navigate aloneness gracefully can shape ethical awareness and compassion. Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. While focusing on introversion, Susan Cain's popular work also highlights the creative and contemplative dimensions of solitude. She critiques a society that often presses people toward constant collaboration and performative extroversion, describing how many outstanding achievements originated from solitary or introspective endeavors. Though the book underscores the strengths of introverts, it contains lessons applicable to anyone who wishes to reclaim personal space for quiet thought. Spiritual dimensions of solitude. Solitude's role in spiritual development appears throughout the records of religious and contemplative traditions worldwide, whether one interprets it in the context of organized faith or as a more personal, secular spirituality. The underlying principle is that quiet aloneness allows people to access profound layers of insight and communion. Encounter with the transcendent. In numerous belief systems, from Christian mystics to Hindu ascetics, solitude is prized because it fosters an unmediated encounter with the sacred. According to this viewpoint, the voice of the divine is often drowned out by the clangor of everyday life. Only when an individual withdraws can they hear the gentle guidance or experience the subtle presence that reveals the numinous, self-emptying. Christian mystics sometimes speak of kenosis, or self-emptying, which involves setting aside personal egoic concerns so that divine grace can enter. Buddhists emphasize letting go of attachments that tie the mind to a false sense of identity. Solitude is a time for confronting these attachments with less distraction. Without societal roles or immediate feedback from others, one is challenged to see what remains when the usual defenses and pretenses fall away. Moral and ethical recalibration. Spiritual teachers throughout history have noted that authentic solitude leads not to selfish withdrawal, but to refined moral awareness. When alone, a person may vividly perceive how their actions and attitudes affect others, recognizing patterns that are less visible in the rush of social living. By emerging from solitude with greater clarity and humility, one's capacity for compassion and ethical responsibility can deepen. Creativity, art, and solitude. Artists, poets, composers, and innovators frequently cite solitude as vital to their craft. Although collaboration and critique can be invaluable at certain stages, the genesis of new ideas often occurs in the private realm. The reason is partly psychological. Solitary work grants freedom to experiment with half-formed concepts or radical visions without worrying about immediate judgment or the demands of group consensus. The diaries and letters of creative luminaries reveal how they structured time alone to incubate ideas. Some rose before sunrise to write in stillness, while others withdrew to remote cottages or studios. Even when artists lived in bustling cities, they often carved out periods of isolation to refine their approach. In many cases, the final product, an innovative painting style, a new musical form, a freshly woven narrative, owed its inception to these pockets of unbroken attention. Such testimonies resonate with modern findings in creativity research. By giving the mind ample space to wander or to concentrate deeply, solitude can foster a state of flow, described by psychologists as an optimal zone of engagement. In that state, self-consciousness diminishes, time seems to dissolve, and the creative task unfolds with a sense of effortless focus. While one may eventually share and refine the work in a community, solitude remains a critical step in the creative process. Misconceptions and risks associated with solitude. Despite solitude's manifold virtues, it carries potential risks and misunderstandings that warrant consideration. A balanced perspective recognizes that solitude is neither universally beneficial nor universally detrimental. Rather, it depends on the individual's mindset, circumstances, and intentions. Escapism. One danger is using solitude as a shield against challenges. If a person withdraws not for clarity, but to avoid uncomfortable conversations or responsibilities, they may be evading growth opportunities. Hiding in solitude can perpetuate denial, leaving unresolved problems to fester. Eventually, what began as a quiet respite can become an isolated fortress, trapping the individual instead of liberating them. Social alienation. Excessive solitude can breed a sense of alienation, especially if it replaces healthy social connections. People might become more awkward in group settings or lose the ability to empathize with others if they rarely engage with them. In cultures that prize hyper-independence, some individuals may romanticize extended aloneness without acknowledging the genuine need for supportive relationships. Romanticizing solitude. The figure of the solitary genius, the hermit artist, the visionary saint, has captured the imagination of many, yet not all solitude leads to revelations. Some individuals may grow restless or depressed if they spend too much time disconnected from society, particularly if they lack the psychological or spiritual resources to navigate their inner worlds. Thus, romantic notions of solitude should be tempered with realism. Lack of social support. Humans thrive on interdependence. Even those deeply drawn to solitude need a network of people they trust. Sudden or extreme isolation in response to emotional distress can exacerbate underlying mental health struggles. Hence, mental health professionals often recommend that solitude be balanced with therapy sessions, group support, or friendships that provide a safety net. Societal and cultural dimensions. Attitudes towards solitude are shaped by broader cultural values. In some societies, a person seeking time alone might be viewed with suspicion and labeled aloof or antisocial. In others, especially those influenced by contemplative religions, periods of withdrawal are seen as a natural and even praiseworthy practice. Over the centuries, industrialization and urbanization have altered the social landscape, making it possible for individuals to live in crowded apartments while feeling deeply alone. Conversely, modern technology permits living on a remote homestead while still maintaining virtual connections. In many Western settings, the cultural bias tilts toward extroverted behaviors, group brainstorming in offices, public speaking as a sign of leadership, and frequent social media posting as a measure of one's involvement. People who require significant stretches of solitude may feel misunderstood, yet there is evidence that this bias is starting to shift. Movements emphasizing minimalism, slow living, or mindfulness retreats represent a counter-movement, valuing silent reflection as much as social networking. It is also worth noting that solitude has at times been associated with privilege. The ability to take a sabbatical, rent a cabin, or devote hours to reading and meditation may be out of reach for those who juggle multiple jobs or family responsibilities. Critics argue that promoting solitude can neglect the economic and social realities that prevent many from finding or affording time alone. This criticism does not negate solitude's inherent worth, but it underscores that access to solitude is influenced by socioeconomic factors. The influence of technology. Technology has dramatically reconfigured the landscape of solitude. With smartphones and the internet, the line between solitude and connection can blur. One might be physically alone in an apartment, yet mentally tethered to an online network brimming with conversations, notifications, and social media updates. Online interactions. Connectivity can mitigate genuine loneliness for those unable to leave their homes or find local communities. However, the steady drip of digital input can also erode solitude. Even individuals attempting to relax in quiet might feel the tug of instant messaging or feel compelled to check how many likes their latest post received. Virtual retreats. Some organizations offer virtual solitude retreats, wherein participants log off non-essential social media and instead join online gatherings for guided meditation or lectures. These can be helpful to a degree, especially if physical travel is not feasible. Yet the fact that they remain online-based means that the participant never fully severs the digital tether. Critics caution that true solitude, where one listens only to their internal sense of time and presence, might be diluted by the ongoing hum of virtual connectivity. Cyberbullying and social pressure. Modern connectivity fosters new forms of social pressure, from relentless group chats to online harassment. In response, solitude can serve as a refuge from digital negativity. By deliberately stepping away from these platforms, individuals can safeguard their well-being. The challenge is that social media platforms and digital services are often designed to keep users engaged. Choosing solitude thus becomes an act of boundary setting, requiring resolve and self-awareness. Integrating solitude into daily life. Micro-solitudes. For many, extended retreats are not feasible given responsibilities and financial realities. In such cases, integrating tiny pockets of solitude into daily routines can offer significant benefits. These micro-solitudes might include a few mindful breaths upon waking, a brief walk alone during a lunch break, or a silent cup of tea in the afternoon. By sprinkling these moments throughout the day, one steadily accustoms the mind to intervals of quiet reflection without massively overhauling a schedule. Mindful commuting. Commuting can transform from a mundane necessity into a contemplative exercise. Instead of filling the journey with podcasts, music, or phone calls, one might decide on certain days to let the mind wander, observe the surroundings, or cultivate a sense of presence. Even if the route is noisy, a crowded train, a busy freeway, the act of mindfully disengaging from incessant input can yield a small but valuable window of solitude. Domestic sanctuaries. In a home environment shared with partners, roommates, or children, solitude might be elusive. To foster it, one can designate a particular corner, perhaps a nook near a window or a separate room if possible, as a sanctuary for reading, meditation, or quiet hobbies. Over time, the consistent use of that space for peaceful activities helps all household members recognize its function. This arrangement not only promotes personal well-being, but also models healthy boundaries for others, including children learning about the value of respectful privacy. Periodic retreats. Short personal getaways can prove transformative even if one cannot manage a lengthy sabbatical. A long weekend in a rustic cabin, a solo camping trip, or a guided silent retreat at a spiritual center might open new vistas of self-understanding and tranquility. Returning to familiar routines afterward, individuals often report renewed mental clarity or an expanded sense of gratitude for the people and habits that populate their lives. Balancing solitude with healthy relationships. At its best, solitude complements and strengthens relationships. Providing an arena for self-reflection can nurture emotional independence, making a person less likely to project insecurities onto loved ones. Some therapists observe that couples who maintain individual space for solitude foster greater mutual respect and curiosity. However, attaining this balance requires trust and communication. A partner or close friend might initially misinterpret a desire for solitude as a personal rejection. Establishing that solitude is an essential form of self-care, much like exercise or reading, can alleviate misunderstandings. Children, too, benefit from seeing adults engage in regular moments of calm. This models how they might later seek healthy solitude to process their feelings. In workplaces or academic settings, an openness to solitude can spark both innovation and better teamwork. Employees who refresh themselves in quiet intervals often return to group collaboration with sharper focus and a more patient disposition. Likewise, teams that respect each other's need for quiet can create an environment that avoids the pitfalls of endless meetings and groupthink. Cultural icons, literature, and solitude. Renowned figures across the arts and humanities have championed solitude in their ways, leaving behind ample testimony that underscores its potency. Virginia Woolf wrote an influential essay arguing that a woman must have a private room and the means to support herself if she is to write creatively. Though her essay primarily tackled gender inequality, it also advanced the premise that uninterrupted private space is foundational for unleashing one's imaginative or intellectual gifts. Rainer Maria Rilke, the Austro-Bohemian poet, composed letters urging younger creatives to explore their inner worlds through solitude. He believed that authentic artistry emerges from deep within rather than from external approval. These letters continue to inspire budding writers to cultivate inwardness through quiet reflection. Franz Kafka documented in his diaries the tension between his introverted inclinations and the demands of family and society. While some of his reflections show the strain of solitude that edges into loneliness, they also affirm that his starkly original literary voice took shape partially through introspection. From these varied examples, one sees that solitude has historically served as an incubator not only for personal insight, but also for cultural innovation. Even if these icons are sometimes wrestled with existential doubt or a sense of being misunderstood, their creative and intellectual legacies suggest that time alone can reshape how we perceive reality. The therapeutic use of solitude. Several therapeutic modalities incorporate elements of solitude, recognizing that it can serve as a powerful catalyst for self-discovery and healing. Wilderness therapy programs, for instance, place participants in carefully supervised natural settings. While not entirely alone, individuals are encouraged to spend intervals reflecting in solitude, journaling, or meditating amidst a forest or desert landscape. The unfamiliar environment strips away many societal cues, opening a space for deeper introspection. Similarly, therapy clients might be guided to take short solo retreats during a course of counseling. This does not necessarily require traveling far. One might simply stay at home in relative silence for a day, turning off phones, avoiding unneeded errands, and allowing whatever arises within to be processed without distraction. Such experiences can clarify how the client reacts to being alone, exposing fears, resentments, or yearnings. Accompanied by professional guidance, these glimpses into the psyche can promote breakthroughs in understanding long-standing issues. Nonetheless, caution is advised. People grappling with severe mental health challenges, such as profound depression or post-traumatic stress, may need consistent support and should not abruptly isolate themselves. The constructive use of solitude in therapy relies on balancing alone time with professional supervision and social support structures. Gender perspectives on solitude. Access to meaningful solitude has often been shaped by gender roles. In many historical contexts, men held social and economic advantages that afforded them private studies, or at least the capacity to step away from domestic chores. Women, confined by familial and societal expectations, frequently found it more difficult to secure time alone for intellectual, creative, or spiritual pursuits. Virginia Woolf's argument that women require a dedicated space and an income to explore their artistic faculties underscores how solitude is not solely a matter of temperament but also social power. Although contemporary cultures have grown more egalitarian in various parts of the world, obstacles remain. Working mothers, for example, may struggle to find quiet time amid round-the-clock responsibilities. Cultural or religious norms in certain societies might still discourage women from traveling or living alone. Nevertheless, as gender norms evolve, more women are openly demanding and defending their right to solitude. They publish memoirs of solo travel, embrace personal retreats, or structure their family arrangements to allow for daily moments of reflection. In parallel, men also navigate changing expectations. with some finding it necessary to explain or justify their desire for solitude in a world that equates masculine success with constant action. Ultimately, the pursuit of solitude reveals broader questions about whose time is valued and how societies distribute personal freedoms. Ethical and social implications. Solitude is often considered a private affair, yet it contains ethical and social dimensions. If a person uses solitude to develop empathy, examine personal biases, and reflect on societal issues, the outcome can benefit the wider community. History is replete with leaders, political, spiritual, and educational, who turned to solitude for clarity during critical junctures. By stepping back from the fray, they returned with renewed vigor to address communal challenges. On the other hand, if solitude is pursued to disregard or belittle social connections, or if it fosters contempt for society, the consequence can be detrimental. There is a delicate balance between individual insight and community responsibility. In an era of global crises, from environmental concerns to humanitarian issues, some question whether encouraging solitude might diminish collective action. Advocates counter that solitude, properly integrated, enhances a person's capacity to engage with society. It offers respite from burnout, fosters original thinking, and can invigorate moral purpose. Extroversion, introversion, and solitude. Solitude is sometimes conflated with introversion, but a closer look reveals that these are related yet distinct concepts. Introversion pertains to where a person predominantly draws energy, from within or from social interaction, whereas solitude is a chosen action or condition, accessible to both introverts and extroverts. Extroverts can find solitude beneficial as well, especially if they feel overwhelmed by constant stimulation. The difference is often in the duration or frequency. An introvert may need extended quiet time to recharge, while an extrovert might prefer shorter intervals of solitude, punctuating more frequent social engagement. Susan Cain's influential work, which highlights the strengths that introverts bring to society, underscores that many creative, thoughtful contributions arise when individuals are given space to think deeply on their own. The takeaway is not that solitude is best for introverts alone, but that certain tasks and insights flourish in solitude for anyone willing to embrace it. On an organizational level, respecting diverse needs for alone time can enrich group projects and foster mutual understanding. Critiques of solitude. Not everyone endorses solitude as uniformly beneficial. Critics have voiced concerns that can be grouped under several themes: reinforced echo chambers. Without the checks and balances of social feedback, individuals might entrench themselves in personal biases or fixations. Solitude could magnify rigid thinking if a person refuses input from others. Magnified loneliness. Solitude's positive framing requires a voluntary element. If people yearn for friendship or family bonds but cannot access them, calling their situation solitude may trivialize a painful predicament. Undermine social fabric. A society that emphasizes individual pursuits at the expense of collective well-being might see an erosion of shared civic responsibilities. Encouraging too much solitude could theoretically harm community life if it becomes a widespread avoidance of public matters. These critiques highlight the need for discernment. Solitude is neither a cure-all nor an inherently harmful practice. Its real impact depends on one's motivations, psychological health, and cultural context. Contemporary cultural shifts. Modern culture appears ambivalent about solitude. On one hand, digital platforms and work environments continuously push for responsiveness. People are often lauded for multitasking or staying connected. On the other hand, a rising tide of mindfulness programs, yoga studios, and self-care movements attests to a yearning for quiet reflection and respite from overstimulation. Terms like digital detox, slow living, and off the grid are used widely to describe intentional breaks from technology. Retreat centers offering silent weekends or even longer stretches without talking have surged in popularity. Authors and thought leaders highlight the importance of blocking out deep work time. uninterrupted intervals when knowledge workers can delve into complex tasks without distractions. At a social level, this shift is complicated by the profit motives of tech companies whose business models rely on constant engagement. With smartphone apps designed to spark frequent check-ins and social platforms employing subtle psychological hooks, it can feel like an uphill battle to claim even a handful of minutes for solitude. This very tension lends solitude an air of rebelliousness, as if stepping away from the digital stream is an act of reclaiming personal autonomy. Personal testimonies and case studies. Personal narratives often illustrate how solitude shapes real lives. A corporate executive might report that daily meditative breaks allowed them to reduce burnout and make more ethical decisions at work. An avid traveler might speak of hiking solo along remote trails, discovering unanticipated self-confidence in the face of nature's challenges. A grieving individual might find that only in absolute quiet could they process their loss, experiencing waves of sorrow and remembrance unimpeded by social expectations. Stories also emerge from more severe contexts. Individuals suffering from trauma may require carefully structured intervals of solitude where they can journal or express emotions without witnesses. If guided properly, this can be healing. When done impulsively or without a support network, it could exacerbate post-traumatic stress. In short, personal testimonies confirm solitude's potency. It can catalyze growth or intensify struggles, depending on how and why it is used. Solitude in education and child development. The role of solitude in child development continues to intrigue psychologists and educators. Too often, modern schooling and parenting strategies fill every moment with structured activities. Children rarely experience the boredom that once prompted imaginative play, yet research suggests that unstructured time alone fosters self-reliance and creativity. Solitary play allows children to invent games, storytelling scenarios, or art projects that stem from their interests rather than adult directives. Approaches such as the Montessori or Waldorf methods incorporate ample freedom for children to work individually, exploring tasks at their own pace. Teachers observe rather than constantly direct, intervening minimally. In such contexts, children develop a sense of autonomy and can delve deeply into an activity without peer interruptions. Family life can mirror these principles if parents encourage quiet reading, journaling, or daydreaming in addition to group outings. Encouraging healthy solitude does not mean ignoring social development. Children also need to learn cooperation, empathy, and conflict resolution. Indeed, the best educational models strike a balance. Children feel secure in their relationships, but also discover that time alone can be a wellspring of creativity, self-soothing, and independent thought. The future of solitude. As new technologies continue to blur the boundaries between the physical and virtual realms, solitude's future may become even more nuanced. With virtual reality headsets offering digital recreations of nature and social experiences, one might ask, if we can simulate a mountain cabin or a quiet forest in a headset, does that count as genuine solitude? The distinction between real-world isolation and mediated virtual experiences could grow increasingly complex. Large-scale global issues, from pandemics to climate change, can heighten or reduce the drive for solitude. On one hand, crises can bring people closer, reinforcing communal values. On the other, individuals coping with stress might crave moments of escape, turning to solitary pursuits for sanity in a chaotic world. Future generations might evolve new cultural norms around solitude, blending it seamlessly into daily rituals or forging specialized institutions for mindful withdrawal. Beyond speculation, the essential spirit of solitude will likely endure. Human beings, no matter how technologically advanced, contain layers of emotion and thought that can only be explored through some degree of introspection. Whether it occurs in a digital environment, a traditional hermitage, or a simple bedroom, solitude remains a gateway to the mysterious depths of human consciousness, and perhaps to a more authentic engagement with the planet and the communities we inhabit. Conclusion. Solitude endures as a timeless phenomenon woven into the cultural and spiritual history of humanity. It has inspired monks, philosophers, poets, and artists, as well as countless ordinary individuals who find that moments alone are essential for understanding their minds and hearts. Across ages and continents, solitude surfaces again and again as a tool for self-awareness, a refuge for emotional restoration, and a platform for creative and spiritual discovery. At its healthiest, solitude offers more than personal enrichment. It can sharpen ethical insight, strengthen social bonds by reducing emotional neediness, and prompt contributions to culture and knowledge that might never have emerged in the constant clamor. Yet solitude's power also brings responsibility. If chosen for escapism, it can wall off individuals from realities they need to confront. If imposed or prolonged against one's will, it can crush the spirit with loneliness. If romanticized, solitude may become an unattainable ideal that fails to acknowledge the real challenges of living alone. In our modern context, buzzing with digital connections, shaped by global crises, and grappling with shifting societal norms, solitude remains a vital practice. It stands as a reminder that beneath the waves of social media and the demands of professional life, there is an interior life waiting to be explored. By honoring solitude with a sense of balance and self-awareness, individuals can create intervals of quiet that refresh creativity, deepen understanding, and even reignite compassion for others. And so we circle back to that early dawn scene, the mist over still water, the whispered hush of a sleeping world, the lone figure standing silently on the shore. This image is neither lonely nor isolating. Rather, it suggests the possibility that in stillness, a person may discover the richest melodies of the soul. The motionless expanse of water mirrors the depths within. For those willing to step across the threshold of solitude, even for a few minutes at a time, the gifts can be as profound as the ancient mountain, or as subtle as a single drop of dew catching the first rays of morning light. May we each find our version of that dawn-lit shore, whether it is in a silent retreat, a calm pause between tasks, or the quiet corners of our homes. May we learn through solitude to listen more intently to the voice of our hearts, emerging with a clearer vision of how to live, love, and contribute to the wider tapestry of human life.